The notification ping echoed through Sarah Chen's dimly lit home office at 11:42 p.m., just as she was finishing grading her advanced photography students' portfolios. She almost ignored it. Usually, nothing good came from Instagram messages this late at night. But something made her pause, her cursor hovering over the minimize button. Maybe it was instinct, or maybe it was the fact that the message came from Jessica Torres, one of her most promising students. "Professor Chen, I know it's late, but something feels off about this photo. Maybe I'm paranoid, but could you take a look?" The image loaded slowly, a seemingly innocent mirror selfie of a young woman, probably around 20, posing in what looked like a department store changing room. She wore oversized sunglasses despite being indoors, and a forced smile that didn't quite reach the rest of her face. Sarah's trained eye automatically began breaking down the composition, the angle, the lighting, the reflection patterns, when she saw it. In the curved reflection of the woman's sunglasses, barely visible unless you knew what to look for, was the image of another person. Someone holding what appeared to be a weapon. Sarah's heart rate quickened as she zoomed in, her fingers trembling slightly on the mouse. After 15 years of teaching digital photography and forensics, she developed an eye for details others might miss. The reflection was grainy, but there was no mistaking the distinctive shape of a handgun. "Call me immediately," Sarah typed back to Jessica, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "No matter what time you see this." While waiting for a response, Sarah began taking screenshots, her mind racing through possibilities. This could be nothing, maybe a toy gun, maybe an old photo, maybe just her imagination running wild after too many late nights watching crime documentaries. But the pit in her stomach told her otherwise. Her phone rang 3 minutes later. "I've been staring at it for an hour," Jessica said without preamble, her voice tight with anxiety. "At first, I thought I was seeing things, but... How did you come across this photo?" Sarah asked, already opening her forensic photography software, the one she used to teach students about image manipulation and digital evidence. "It showed up on my Explorer feed." The account's new, only a few posts. "But Professor Chen, it's not just this photo. I started looking through the account, and there are others. Different girls, same changing room, same reflections in the background." Sarah's fingers flew across her keyboard, navigating to the account. 9 photos, all posted within the last week. All featuring different young women in the same changing room. All wearing similar oversized sunglasses. "The location tag," Sarah murmured, more to herself than to Jessica. "Riverside Mall. That's less than 20 minutes from campus. Should we call the police?" Jessica's voice cracked slightly. Sarah leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. She'd worked with the local police department before, helping analyze surveillance footage and crime scene photos. But she also knew how these things could go. Without concrete evidence, without being able to prove immediate danger. "Send me links to all the photos you found," Sarah decided. "I'm going to make some calls. I know someone in the cyber crimes unit." As Sarah hung up, her computer pinged with another notification. A new photo had just been posted to the account. Same changing room. Same sunglasses. But this time, Sarah recognized the girl. Emma Martinez, a freshman from her introduction to digital photography class, who'd missed the last 2 weeks of lectures. Sarah's hands shook as she dialed another number, one she hadn't used in years. After 4 rings, a groggy voice answered. "Detective Wilson? It's Sarah Chen. Remember that favor you owe me from the Harrison case? I'm calling it in." Over the next 3 hours, Sarah's office transformed into an impromptu investigation center. Detective James Wilson arrived within 30 minutes, still in jeans and a wrinkled t-shirt, his badge hanging around his neck. Together, they began piecing together what they were seeing. "The sunglasses are clever," Sarah explained, pulling up multiple photos side by side. They're using them to document the victims without being obvious. See how each reflection shows something slightly different. Weapons, other people, what looks like exit doors. They're cataloging the layout, the security measures, maybe even escape routes. Wilson nodded grimly, his years of experience evident in the tight set of his jaw. And the changing room provides perfect cover. No security cameras, private enough to force someone to pose without drawing attention. The question is, are these photos warnings or trophies? Both, maybe, Sarah suggested, pulling up Emma's photo again. But what matters is that at least one of these girls is real, and she's missing classes. The detective was already on his phone, calling in resources. Within an hour, their suspicions were confirmed. 3 of the 9 girls in the photos had been reported missing in the last month, all from different surrounding towns. Emma Martinez made 4. As dawn broke over the city, Sarah stood at her office window, watching the sky turn from black to deep purple to streaky pink. Behind her, a team of cybercrime specialists had taken over her space, their laptops and equipment creating a soft electronic hum. They'd tracked the Instagram account to an IP address in the mall's vicinity, but the trail went cold there. Whoever was behind this knew how to cover their digital tracks. "We're setting up surveillance at the mall," Wilson informed her, appearing at her side with 2 cups of coffee. He handed her one. "But we need to move carefully. If they realize we're on to them." Sarah nodded, understanding the implications. The girls could disappear completely. Exactly. Which is why I need to ask you something, and you're not going to like it. Sarah turned to face him, already knowing what was coming. In the early morning light, she could see every line of worry on his face, the weight of 20 years of police work in his eyes. "You have connections at the mall," he continued. "Through your photography workshops. The security team knows you, trusts you. And you know what to look for in those photos, details we might miss. You want me to be your eyes on the inside," Sarah stated. It wasn't a question. It would be completely unauthorized. "If anything went wrong, I couldn't officially protect you. But we need someone who can move around without raising suspicion, someone who knows photography and can spot the signs." Sarah took a long sip of her coffee, buying time to think. She thought about Emma, sitting alone in her lecture hall just 2 weeks ago, asking questions about light refraction and lens angles. She thought about the other girls in those photos, about their families waiting for answers. She thought about Jessica, who'd trusted her instincts enough to reach out in the middle of the night. "I have a workshop scheduled there next week anyway," she said finally. "Teaching mall employees about social media photography for their businesses. It would be easy enough to extend it, add some sessions." Wilson's relief was palpable. "We'll have plainclothes officers nearby at all times. At the first sign of trouble." "I know," Sarah interrupted. "I'll be careful." "But James?" She turned to face him fully. "Promise me something. Promise me we'll find them." The detective's face hardened with determination. "We will. One way or another, we'll find them." As Sarah gathered her things to head home and prepare for her morning classes, her phone buzzed one final time. Another Instagram notification. Her heart nearly stopped when she saw it, a new photo, posted seconds ago. Another girl, another pair of sunglasses. But this time, in the reflection, she could clearly see someone watching through the changing room's ventilation grate. They were evolving, getting bolder. And Sarah had just volunteered to step right into their hunting ground. She forwarded the photo to Wilson with shaking hands, then sat heavily in her chair. On her desk, student portfolios lay scattered, forgotten in the night's chaos. Images of landscapes, portraits, still lives, normal photos by normal students living normal lives. How quickly everything had changed with a single late-night message. Sarah pulled up Emma's last submitted assignment on her computer, a series of self-portraits about identity and masks. In every photo, Emma stared directly into the camera, her gaze challenging and confident. So different from the frightened eyes barely visible behind those oversized sunglasses in the changing room photo. "Hold on, Emma," Sarah whispered to the screen. "Just hold on. We're coming." As she finally left her office, the sun now fully risen over the city, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she just stepped onto a path that would change everything, not just for her, but for every person involved in this twisted digital breadcrumb trail. The weight of her camera bag felt heavier than usual on her shoulder, no longer just a tool for teaching but potentially a weapon in the fight to save lives. She had 1 week to prepare, 1 week to transform herself from a photography professor into something else entirely. 1 week before she would walk into Riverside Mall, smile at the security guards who knew her, set up her workshop equipment, and begin hunting monsters who hid behind Instagram filters and carefully staged photos. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the campus parking lot. Somewhere in the city, a changing room mirror reflected nothing but empty space, waiting for its next unwitting subject. And in Sarah's pocket, her phone pinged again, another notification, another photo, another silent cry for help hidden in plain sight. The fluorescent lights of Riverside Mall buzzed overhead as Sarah adjusted her camera equipment for the third time. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. 5 days had passed since discovering those haunting Instagram photos, and now she stood less than 50 feet from the changing room where it all began. "Remember," Detective Wilson's voice crackled through her nearly invisible earpiece, "you're just a photography instructor giving a workshop. Nothing more." Sarah forced herself to breathe normally as she watched mall employees filter into the makeshift classroom she'd set up in an empty storefront. Among them, 3 plainclothes officers posed as eager students, their weapons concealed beneath casual attire. She recognized Detective Wilson's partner, Amanda Rhodes, sitting in the back row, her police-issued sidearm hidden beneath a flowing cardigan. "Good morning, everyone," Sarah began, her voice steadier than she felt. "Today we're going to explore how lighting and angles can transform ordinary retail spaces into compelling social media content." As she led the group through basic photography principles, her eyes constantly scanned the crowd outside the store's windows. The morning rush of shoppers was beginning, and with it, the knot in her stomach tightened. Somewhere in this mall, someone was hunting young women, and she was their only chance. "Now, let's try a practical exercise," Sarah announced, right on schedule. "We'll break into small groups and practice these techniques in different locations around the mall." The class dispersed, each group accompanied by one of the undercover officers. Sarah led her group, which included Amanda, toward the department store where the changing room photos had been taken. Every step felt like walking through quicksand. "Notice how the overhead lighting creates natural shadows," Sarah explained, her camera clicking steadily as she photographed innocent displays. But her lens was actually focused on the reflections in the store's many mirrors, capturing faces, movements, anything suspicious. Then she saw it. A man in a blue polo shirt, pretending to fold clothes near the changing rooms. He'd been in the same spot when they arrived 15 minutes ago, his movements mechanical and repetitive. More importantly, he kept glancing at his phone, then at the entrance, then back at his phone. Sarah positioned herself to photograph a mannequin display, carefully angling her lens to capture the man's reflection. Through her viewfinder, she watched him check his phone again, then speak quietly into what appeared to be a Bluetooth device. "Possible subject," Amanda murmured into her concealed mic, having noticed the same thing. Blue polo, dark hair, approximately 6 feet tall, showing pattern behavior near target location. Sarah's pulse quickened as she continued her lesson, maintaining her cover while documenting everything. "The key to retail photography is capturing authentic moments," she explained to her group, moving them closer to the changing rooms. "Notice how the mirrors create depth." She stopped mid-sentence. Through her camera's display, she'd spotted something that made her blood run cold. In the reflection of a mirror, partially hidden behind a rack of dresses, she saw Emma Martinez. The missing student looked dramatically different from her class photo. Her usually bright eyes were dull, her movements robotic as she hung clothes on a rack. She wore a store uniform, complete with a name tag that read Rachel. Target confirmed, Amanda whispered into her mic. Emma Martinez, posing as an employee. Possible trafficking tactic to hide victims in plain sight. Sarah's mind raced. She needed to get closer, to confirm it was really Emma, to somehow let her know help was coming. But before she could move, Emma's eyes met hers in the mirror's reflection. For a split second, recognition flickered across her face, then pure terror. The man in the blue polo immediately stepped forward, placing himself between Emma and Sarah's group. Emma disappeared behind a rack of clothes, and when she emerged seconds later, her face was completely blank again, as if she'd never seen Sarah at all. Maintain position, Wilson's voice warned in Sarah's earpiece. We can't risk spooking them. If they realize we've identified her, they'll move her, Sarah finished silently, her heart pounding. She forced herself to continue the lesson, leading her group away from the department store while every instinct screamed at her to run back and grab Emma. The rest of the workshop passed in a blur. Sarah's mind kept returning to Emma's eyes in that mirror, to the flash of recognition and fear. What had they done to her to make her so afraid? How many others were hidden throughout the mall, dressed as employees, hidden in plain sight? As the workshop wrapped up, Sarah began packing her equipment with trembling hands. The mall was closing soon, and with it, their chance to maintain surveillance of Emma's location. We've identified 3 more, Wilson informed her through the earpiece. All wearing employee uniforms from different stores. All reported missing within the last 2 months. They're using the mall as a staging ground, hiding the girls in shift rotations. It's brilliant, Sarah replied bitterly, her voice barely a whisper. No one looks twice at retail workers. They become invisible. We're setting up a task force, Wilson continued. But we need more. We need to know where they're taking them after hours, how they're controlling them. We need. A commotion near the department store entrance cut him off. Sarah turned just in time to see Emma bolt from behind a clothing rack, running full speed toward the exit. The man in the blue polo was right behind her, his casual demeanor replaced by predatory focus. Without thinking, Sarah grabbed her camera and started shooting, the rapid-fire clicks drawing attention. Emma ran past her, their eyes meeting for a fraction of a second. This time, there was no fear in her former student's face, only determination. Follow her. Wilson's voice commanded in her ear. Rhodes is in pursuit of the male subject. Stay with Emma. Sarah ran, her camera still clicking, documenting everything. Emma led her through the mall's service corridors, past surprised maintenance workers and through emergency exits. They emerged into the parking garage, the evening sun casting long shadows between cars. Emma. Sarah called out, her voice echoing off concrete walls. Emma, we're here to help. But Emma kept running, her feet pounding against the pavement. She was heading for the lowest level of the garage, where the shadows were deepest. Sarah followed, her lungs burning, aware that she was leaving the range of her earpiece's transmission. She rounded a corner and skidded to a stop. Emma stood frozen about 20 feet away, and she wasn't alone. 3 men surrounded her, their expressions cold and professional. One held a taser, another a syringe. Professor Chen, Emma's voice was barely audible. I'm sorry. They made me run. They said if I didn't lead you here. Shut up, the man with the taser snapped. He turned to Sarah, his smile devoid of warmth. The photographer. We've been watching you all week. So concerned about the changing room photos that you never considered they might be a trap. Sarah's mind raced. She was out of earpiece range. The police had followed the man in the blue polo, likely by design. She was alone, armed only with her camera, facing 3 men who had been trafficking young women for months, maybe years. But she still had one advantage they didn't know about. "Smile," she said, and raised her camera. The flash was blindingly bright in the dim garage, its strobing effect amplified by the concrete walls. Sarah had modified it specifically for this possibility, turning her professional camera flash into a disorienting weapon. In the chaos that followed, several things happened at once. Emma dropped to the ground and rolled away from her captors. The men stumbled, temporarily blinded. And Sarah's camera continued to fire, each flash painting the scene in stark bursts of light and shadow. Then new voices joined the chaos, shouts of "Police! Don't move!" echoed through the garage. Detective Wilson emerged from behind a pillar, weapon drawn. More officers appeared from between parked cars. They had never lost track of Sarah at all, they just made it appear that way. As the men were tackled and handcuffed, Sarah ran to Emma, wrapping her arms around her shaking student. "I've got you," she whispered. "You're safe now." But Emma's next words made her blood freeze. "The others," Emma gasped between sobs. "There's so many others. Not just here, other malls, other cities. And the photos, they're still posting the photos." Sarah looked up at Wilson, who had joined them. His face was grim. They both knew what this meant. They hadn't just uncovered a local trafficking operation. They'd stumbled onto something much bigger, something that spread far beyond their city limits. And somewhere, another Instagram notification was probably pinging on someone's phone, another carefully staged photo hiding horrors in plain sight. The garage filled with the sounds of sirens and radio chatter as more police arrived. Sarah held Emma tightly, her camera hanging forgotten at her side. They'd won this battle, saved these girls. But the war was far from over. And now they knew exactly what they were fighting. Sarah's home office had transformed into something unrecognizable. Where neat stacks of student portfolios once sat, evidence boards now covered every wall. Hundreds of Instagram photos were connected by red string, creating a web of victims, locations, and suspects. Her photography analysis software ran constantly, processing metadata and hidden details from images collected across dozens of shopping centers in 3 states. 3 weeks had passed since the confrontation in the parking garage. Emma was safe now, in a protective facility with other rescued victims. But her words about the network's true size haunted Sarah's dreams. Every ping from her phone could mean another victim, another cry for help hidden in carefully crafted social media posts. "You need to sleep," Detective Wilson said from the doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee. Dark circles under his eyes suggested he wasn't following his own advice. "You've been staring at those photos for 18 hours straight." Sarah accepted the coffee without looking away from her computer screen. "I found something in the metadata. Look at this." She pulled up 2 seemingly unrelated photos, one from their mall, another from a shopping center 2 states away. "See the timestamp signatures? They're using the same cameras, probably even the same memory cards. The photos are being taken by the same people, just in different locations." Wilson leaned closer, squinting at the technical data. "That proves coordination between cells. But how are they choosing their targets?" Sarah switched to another screen, this one showing a complex web of social media interactions. "They're mining Instagram data. Looking for specific hashtags, locations, patterns of behavior. They target girls who frequently post from malls, shopping centers, anywhere with changing rooms. Then they..." Her phone buzzed, interrupting her explanation. A new Instagram notification. Sarah's hands shook as she opened it, Wilson reading over her shoulder. The photo showed a young woman trying on sunglasses in what looked like a high-end boutique. Behind her, reflected in a wall of mirrors, was a familiar face, the same man who'd chased Emma through the mall. "He's out on bail," Wilson growled, already pulling out his phone. "This photo was taken 6 hours ago at the Galleria in Springfield." "Wait," Sarah zoomed in on the image. "Look at the security camera in the corner of the reflection. It's unplugged. They're not just using these photos to document their victims, they're showing off their preparation, their control over these spaces." A sharp knock on her front door made them both jump. Sarah checked the security camera feed on her laptop. Jessica Torres stood on her porch, clutching her camera bag, looking nervously over her shoulder. When Sarah opened the door, her former student burst in, words tumbling out in a panic. "They followed me here. I'm sorry, I didn't know where else to go. I was at the Galleria doing a fashion shoot and I saw them, the same men from the surveillance photos you showed me. They were watching another girl, and I started taking pictures, but they saw me and..." "Slow down," Wilson stepped forward, his detective persona taking over. "Start from the beginning. What exactly did you see?" Jessica pulled out her camera with trembling hands. "I got pictures of everything. The men, the girl they were watching, even the car they were using. But then one of them spotted me and..." She swallowed hard. "They have my ID. They know who I am, where I live." Sarah's blood ran cold. Jessica had been her key ally in this investigation, helping analyze hundreds of photos with her trained photographer's eye. Now she'd become a target herself. "You'll stay here," Sarah decided, already moving to secure the house. "I have a guest room, and the police can..." A rock crashed through her front window, sending glass shards flying. Attached to it was a USB drive and a note: "Stop looking, or the next photos we post will be of your students." Wilson drew his weapon and rushed to secure the perimeter while Sarah pulled Jessica away from the windows. But the damage was already done. They'd found her home, her sanctuary. The hunters had become the hunted. Hours later, after the police had swept the area and found no immediate threats, Sarah sat in her reinforced office with Jessica and Wilson, examining the contents of the USB drive. It contained dozens of photos, surveillance shots of Sarah teaching her classes, of Jessica at various photo shoots, of their other student helpers leaving campus at night. "They've been watching us the whole time we were watching them," Jessica whispered, her face pale. "No," Sarah's voice was steel. "They've been performing for us. Every photo, every threat, it's all calculated. They want us to back off, to be afraid." She stood up, facing the evidence board. "But they made a mistake." Wilson raised an eyebrow. "What mistake?" Sarah pointed to the surveillance photos of herself. "Look at the timestamps. These were taken over several weeks, but the metadata shows they were all transferred to this drive today. They had to collect these photos from multiple photographers, multiple cells of their organization. Which means they had to communicate," Wilson finished, understanding dawning on his face. "They had to coordinate. And every digital communication leaves a trace," Jessica added, her photographer's training kicking in. "Even deleted ones." Sarah's fingers flew across her keyboard, running the photos through every analysis tool she had. The metadata includes unique identifier codes from the cameras used. High-end models, all purchased from the same specialty photography shop in Springfield. Wilson was already on his phone, calling in resources. "We can track the sales records, find out who bought those cameras." Better than that, Sarah's screen filled with lines of code. "These cameras are all connected to the same cloud storage account. They're automatically uploading every photo they take. If we can access that cloud, we can see everything they're photographing in real time," Jessica breathed. A new notification pinged, another Instagram post. This time, the photo showed a changing room mirror, empty except for a reflection of a clock showing 9 a.m. Tomorrow's date was written in lipstick on the mirror. It's a warning, Sarah said. They're telling us they're going to take someone tomorrow morning. Or it's a trap, Wilson countered. They know we're on to them. They could be setting us up. Sarah stared at the photo, her mind racing. The changing room was familiar, it was from Riverside Mall, where everything had started. They were bringing it full circle, daring her to stop them. Spring semester starts tomorrow, Jessica suddenly said. There's always a rush of students at the mall in the morning, buying last-minute supplies. Sarah's decision crystallized. Then we'll be ready for them. But this time, we're changing the rules of their game. She pulled up her class roster for tomorrow's morning photography session. 24 students, all young women who fit the trafficker's victim profile. All trained photographers. All potential targets, or potential allies. We're going to turn their hunting ground into our camera trap, she said, already formulating a plan. Every student with a camera, every security guard with an earpiece, every changing room under surveillance. If they want a performance, we'll give them one they'll never forget. Wilson nodded slowly, understanding her strategy. We'll need backup from other precincts, coordination with mall security, surveillance equipment. I can alert my photography network, Jessica added, her fear transforming into determination. We have people in every major mall in the region. If they try to slip away to another location. Sarah looked at the Instagram photo again, at the lipstick numbers that now seemed less like a warning and more like a countdown. In less than 12 hours, everything would come to a head. Either they'd break this trafficking ring wide open, or... She pushed away the alternative. Failure wasn't an option, not with innocent lives at stake. She turned to her evidence board, to the faces of all the victims they'd identified and the many more they hadn't found yet. Get some rest, she told Jessica and Wilson. Tomorrow, we show them what happens when photographers fight back. But as her allies left to prepare for the coming confrontation, Sarah remained in her office, staring at the shattered window. Somewhere out there, the traffickers were watching, waiting, planning their next move. The question was, were they watching closely enough to see what she was planning too? The clock ticked toward midnight, each second bringing them closer to a showdown that would either end this nightmare or plunge them deeper into its darkness. Sarah picked up her camera, checking its modifications one last time. Tomorrow, it wouldn't just be taking photos, it would be capturing evidence of justice. Dawn painted Riverside Mall's parking lot in shades of gray as Sarah positioned her students. Each wore a concealed camera, their regular photography equipment supplemented with Detective Wilson's surveillance gear. 24 pairs of eyes, all trained to notice details others might miss, prepared to document everything. Remember, Sarah whispered into her mic, knowing her voice reached each student through hidden earpieces, you're not heroes. If you spot something, you document and report. Nothing more. She didn't mention the armed undercover officers scattered throughout the mall, or the SWAT team waiting in the loading dock. Her students only needed to be photographers today. The mall's early morning silence broke as employees began arriving for their shifts. Sarah watched through her viewfinder as a group of young women in retail uniforms walked past. Their movements seemed natural, but something caught her eye, a slight hesitation before each step, as if they were being pulled by invisible strings. Possible victims entering through north entrance, she murmured into her mic, Jessica, can you get a better angle? Her former student, positioned near the food court with her camera, responded by adjusting her lens. Confirming, wait. Professor Chen, look at their name tags. Sarah zoomed in. Each name tag displayed a different store, but they all had the same employee number prefix. A detail so small, no one would notice unless they were specifically looking for patterns. They're moving them between stores, Wilson's voice crackled through the earpiece. Rotating them to avoid suspicion. Classic trafficking tactic. A new group caught Sarah's attention, 3 men in business suits, walking with purpose toward the department store. One carried a professional camera bag, but Sarah noticed something odd about how he held it, too careful, too protective. Possible suspects approaching target location, she reported. Camera bag looks weighted wrong for equipment. Acknowledged, Wilson responded. All units maintain position. Let them make the first move. The morning crowd began to thicken as students arrived for back-to-school shopping. Sarah's chest tightened as she watched young women enter the mall alone, each one a potential target. Her students tracked them through their viewfinders, documenting every interaction, every suspicious glance. Then she saw him, the man from the garage confrontation, now wearing an expensive suit and carrying a store manager's badge. He moved through the crowd with practiced ease, stopping occasionally to chat with the controlled movement women in retail uniforms. Primary target confirmed, Wilson's voice was tense. Moving into position. Sarah's phone buzzed. A new Instagram post, another changing room photo, this one showing an empty mirror with a lipstick message, "Smile for the camera." They know, Sarah realized with sudden clarity. They know we're watching. Before she could warn the others, chaos erupted. The fire alarm blared, its piercing scream sending shoppers rushing toward exits. In the confusion, Sarah saw the suited men moving with purpose, not toward escape routes but deeper into the mall. "They're using the evacuation protocol," Wilson shouted over the noise. "All units converge on." His voice cut off as a powerful signal jammer activated, killing their communications. Sarah's students looked to her in panic, their cameras still rolling but their earpieces now useless. "Stay with your assigned partners," she commanded, her teacher's voice cutting through the chaos. "Remember your training. Document everything." She ran toward the department store, her modified camera ready. Through the growing smoke, real or artificial, she couldn't tell, she saw the suited men herding a group of young women toward a service entrance. Among them was a face she recognized from the missing persons board in her office. Sarah raised her camera, but a hand grabbed her arm. She spun to face the garage man, his manager's badge now gone, replaced by cold professionalism. "The photographer," he smiled without warmth. "Always hiding behind your lens, thinking you're invisible. But we see you, Sarah Chen. We've always seen you." "And I see you," she replied, fingers tightening on her camera. "Every photo, every victim, every mistake you've made. It's all documented." He laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "Documentation? That's your weapon?" His grip tightened painfully. "We own these spaces. Every security camera, every computer system, every escape route. Your evidence will disappear, just like those girls are about to disappear." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "You really should have researched me better." She raised her camera and pressed the shutter. But instead of a flash, a focused sonic pulse erupted from the modified device. The man staggered, his equilibrium shattered by the specialized frequency Sarah had developed for exactly this scenario. As he fell, Sarah caught movement in her peripheral vision, more suits converging on her position. She ran, ducking behind a display of mannequins as bullets splintered the plastic figures around her. "Professor Chen." Jessica's voice called from somewhere in the smoke. "The service elevator." Sarah ran toward the voice, her camera continuing to emit its disorienting pulse. Through the haze, she saw Jessica and 3 other students, their cameras forming a defensive perimeter around a group of terrified young women, the ones the traffickers had been trying to move. "The jammers are in their camera bags," Jessica explained quickly. "We traced the signal pattern. If we can get to the elevator before they—" More gunshots interrupted her, sending everyone diving for cover. Sarah's mind raced. The elevator would be a death trap, but the emergency stairs were surely guarded. They needed another way out. Then she remembered, the changing room photos. All those reflections, all those angles she'd analyzed. The ventilation system. The fitting room, she ordered. Now. They moved as one unit, photographers and rescued women alike, into the changing area. Sarah led them to the last stall, where she'd memorized the location of the loose ventilation grate from countless photos. Up, she commanded, already helping the first woman climb. The vent leads to the maintenance tunnel. Wilson has a team waiting there. One by one, they escaped into the ventilation system. Sarah could hear their pursuers getting closer, their footsteps echoing off marble floors. Jessica, the last student remaining, refused to leave. "I'm not going without you." "Yes, you are," Sarah handed her a memory card. "Every photo we took today, every face, every interaction, it's all here. Get it to Wilson." "But now." As Jessica disappeared into the vent, Sarah replaced the grate and turned to face the changing room entrance. She could see shadows approaching through the smoke, hear voices coordinating their attack. She raised her camera one last time, adjusting its settings. If they wanted a photograph so badly, she would give them one they'd never forget. The door burst open, and Sarah pressed the shutter. What happened next would be debated in law enforcement circles for years to come. Some said it was the flash, modified beyond any commercial specifications. Others claimed it was the sonic pulse, tuned to a frequency that disrupted not just balance but consciousness itself. All anyone knew for certain was that when the smoke cleared, Sarah Chen stood among a group of unconscious traffickers, her camera's memory card containing enough evidence to unravel their entire operation. But as she watched Wilson's team sweep in to make arrests, Sarah couldn't celebrate. Her phone had buzzed one final time during the chaos, another Instagram notification. The photo showed a different mall, a different changing room, a different set of sunglasses reflecting unnamed horrors. This had never been about just one operation, one city, one group of traffickers. It was a network, spreading across the country like a digital cancer, hiding its victims in plain sight behind carefully crafted social media posts. Sarah looked at her camera, its modified system smoking slightly from the final confrontation. She had won this battle, saved these lives. But somewhere, another photographer was posting another seemingly innocent photo, marking another potential victim. The war was far from over. But now they knew how to fight it, one image, one reflection, one rescue at a time. The interrogation room's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across Detective Wilson's face as he placed another photograph on the table. Sarah studied it through swollen eyes. She'd taken a hit during the mall confrontation that left her with an impressive bruise. 12 different malls, Wilson said, his voice hoarse from hours of questioning suspects. 28 confirmed victims recovered so far. And these just showed up. He spread out a new series of photos. More changing rooms, more sunglasses, more hidden reflections. But these weren't from Instagram, they were found on encrypted hard drives in the trafficker's possession. They were documenting everything, Sarah murmured, her photographer's eye-catching details even through her exhaustion. Not just the victims, but their whole operation. Security camera locations, guard rotations, escape routes. It's bigger than we thought, Wilson agreed. The mall network was just one branch. They have similar operations in hotels, airports, even college campuses. Each cell operating independently but following the same playbook. Sarah's phone buzzed, another Instagram notification. Her hands shook slightly as she opened it. The photo showed a college classroom, empty except for a pair of sunglasses left on a desk. In their reflection, a clock showed 3 p.m. "That's my classroom," she whispered. "My lecture starts at 3. Wilson was already moving, calling in tactical teams. But Sarah remained seated, studying the photo with growing unease. Something about the angle, the composition. "Wait," she grabbed Wilson's arm. "Look at the photographer's position. This wasn't taken from the door or the windows. This was taken from She stopped, her blood running cold. The ventilation system. The same way they'd escaped during the mall confrontation. They're already inside the building, she realized. They've been watching my classes, learning our investigation techniques. Every photo we analyzed, every pattern we identified, they were studying us while we were studying them. We need to evacuate the campus, Wilson started, but Sarah was already shaking her head. That's what they want. Another chaos scenario, like the mall. They thrive on confusion. She stood, wincing at her injuries. No. We're going to give my lecture exactly as scheduled. Sarah, you can't be serious. Think about it, she interrupted, her mind racing ahead. They've been monitoring my classes, learning my methods. But they don't know that I spent the last 20 years teaching more than just photography. She pulled up her class syllabus on her phone. Today's lecture was supposed to be about light refraction and mirror photography. Instead, I'm going to teach my students how to survive. 2 hours later, Sarah stood at her lectern, facing a classroom full of young photographers. Each student had been quietly briefed by plainclothes officers, their cameras modified with Sarah's specialized defensive technology. In the hallways, SWAT teams waited in maintenance closets and empty offices. Today, Sarah began, her voice carrying to every corner of the room, we're going to discuss the art of observation. Through her peripheral vision, she caught movement in the ventilation grate above her desk. Right on schedule. Photography isn't just about capturing images, she continued, moving casually toward the sunglasses still sitting on her desk. It's about understanding angles, predicting movements, analyzing reflections. She picked up the sunglasses, pretending to examine them. In their reflection, she could see figures moving through the ceiling space, positioning themselves above key points in the room. For example, she held up the sunglasses for the class to see. These lenses tell us quite a lot about our uninvited guests. The ceiling exploded. Men in tactical gear dropped into the room, weapons raised. But Sarah's students were already moving, their modified cameras emitting concentrated pulses that disrupted night vision equipment and tactical communications. Like I said, Sarah announced to the chaos, today's lesson is about observation. And you've been observed. The classroom lights cut out, plunging the room into darkness, except for the infrared targeting systems now activating in every student's camera. They had learned from the mall incident, adapted their technology, prepared for this moment. SWAT teams burst through doors as Sarah's students executed their practiced response. Each flash, each photo, systematically illuminated and disoriented the intruders. No bullets, no violence, just pure tactical photography turned into a defensive art form. Clear. Wilson's voice cut through the chaos minutes later. Building is secured. All suspects in custody. Sarah lowered her camera, surveying the scene. A dozen traffickers lay subdued on her classroom floor, their sophisticated equipment rendered useless by photography students who had learned to see the world differently. Professor Chen, one of her students, called out, holding up a laptop recovered from the ventilation system. You need to see this. The screen showed a massive database, thousands of photos, maps, and documents. Not just trafficking operations, but money laundering schemes, blackmail operations, all hidden behind seemingly innocent social media posts. It's their entire network, Wilson breathed, scrolling through the files. Every cell, every location, every victim. No, Sarah corrected, noticing patterns in the data. It's their training manual. They're franchising this operation, teaching other criminals how to replicate their methods. Those Instagram photos weren't just documentation, they were advertisements. She pulled up the most recent posts, seeing them with new understanding. Each photo contained coded information, prices, contact methods, territories for sale. An entire criminal enterprise, hiding in plain sight on social media. We've got enough evidence to shut down their current operations, Wilson said. But this shows how they'll try to rebuild. Their whole methodology exposed. Sarah turned to her students, who stood ready with their cameras, their faces showing the same determination she felt. Then we'll expose them first. Show the world what to look for, teach people how to really see. She picked up the sunglasses from her desk, studying their reflection one last time. In the curved lenses, she could see her classroom of young photographers, each one now trained not just in art, but in justice. The next generation of traffickers thinks they can hide behind filters and hashtags, she said quietly. But we've created something they never expected, a network of our own. Photographers who know how to see through their disguises, how to fight back with light and lenses. Her phone buzzed again, another Instagram notification. But this time, when she opened it, she smiled. The photo showed her classroom, taken moments ago during the takedown. In it, a dozen students stood with their cameras raised, light triumphing over darkness. The caption read simply, "Lesson learned." 6 months after the university takedown, Sarah Chen stood before a packed auditorium at the National Law Enforcement Conference. Her presentation screen showed a deceptively simple image, a changing room mirror reflecting a pair of sunglasses. This is how it began, she addressed the crowd of police officers, federal agents, and digital crime specialists. One photo, one reflection, one hidden cry for help. Today, I'm going to show you how it ended, and how we can prevent it from happening again. The audience leaned forward as Sarah clicked through her presentation. Each slide revealed another layer of the trafficking network they'd uncovered, the mall operations, the social media codes, the sophisticated photography-based surveillance systems. But more importantly, she showed them how to fight back. The traffickers weaponized photography, she explained, demonstrating the modified cameras her students now used. So we turned their weapon against them. Not just trafficking operations, but money laundering schemes, blackmail operations, all hidden behind seemingly innocent social media posts. It's their entire network, Wilson breathed, scrolling through the files. Every cell, every location, every victim. No, Sarah corrected, noticing patterns in the data. It's their training manual. They're franchising this operation, teaching other criminals how to replicate their methods. Those Instagram photos weren't just documentation, they were advertisements. She pulled up the most recent posts, seeing them with new understanding. Each photo contained coded information, prices, contact methods, territories for sale. An entire criminal enterprise, hiding in plain sight on social media. We've got enough evidence to shut down their current operations, Wilson said. But this shows how they'll try to rebuild. Their whole methodology exposed. Sarah turned to her students, who stood ready with their cameras, their faces showing the same determination she felt. Then we'll expose them first. Show the world what to look for, teach people how to really see. She picked up the sunglasses from her desk, studying their reflection one last time. In the curved lenses, she could see her classroom of young photographers, each one now trained not just in art, but in justice. The next generation of traffickers thinks they can hide behind filters and hashtags, she said quietly. But we've created something they never expected, a network of our own. Photographers who know how to see through their disguises, how to fight back with light and lenses. Her phone buzzed again, another Instagram notification. But this time, when she opened it, she smiled. The photo showed her classroom, taken moments ago during the takedown. In it, a dozen students stood with their cameras raised, light triumphing over darkness. The caption read simply, "Lesson learned." 6 months after the university takedown, Sarah Chen stood before a packed auditorium at the National Law Enforcement Conference. Her presentation screen showed a deceptively simple image, a changing room mirror reflecting a pair of sunglasses. This is how it began, she addressed the crowd of police officers, federal agents, and digital crime specialists. One photo, one reflection, one hidden cry for help. Today, I'm going to show you how it ended, and how we can prevent it from happening again. The audience leaned forward as Sarah clicked through her presentation. Each slide revealed another layer of the trafficking network they'd uncovered: the mall operations, the social media codes, the sophisticated photography-based surveillance systems. But more importantly, she showed them how to fight back. The traffickers weaponized photography, she explained, demonstrating the modified cameras her students now used. So we turned their weapon against them. Sarah raised her modified camera, now streamlined and refined after months of development. This started as a weapon of last resort. Now it's becoming a symbol of change. The audience burst into applause, but Sarah wasn't finished. She clicked to one final slide, a new Instagram post, uploaded that morning from a mall in Singapore. Another changing room, another pair of sunglasses. But this time, the reflection showed something different: a security team moving in to prevent a crime before it happened. The traffickers taught us something valuable, Sarah concluded. They showed us how powerful photography can be when used with purpose. They used it to hide truth, we're using it to reveal it. They used it to isolate victims, we're using it to build connections. They used it to create fear, we're using it to inspire hope. As the conference hall erupted in a standing ovation, Sarah's phone buzzed one last time. A message from Emma: just stopped another attempt at Riverside Mall. Your students' new facial recognition system worked perfectly. They never even made it past the entrance. Sarah smiled, remembering that first late-night Instagram notification that had started everything. The traffickers had built their empire on the assumption that people would keep looking away, keep scrolling past, keep pretending not to see. Instead, they'd awakened something they never expected: a world of watchers, armed with cameras and determination. Later that evening, Sarah stood in her rebuilt home office, surrounded by the evidence boards that had led them to victory. But the red strings no longer connected victims to criminals. Now they linked training centers, security teams, and photography clubs across the globe. A network of light to fight the network of shadows. Her laptop chimed with a video call from Jessica, now running her own photography security firm in Europe. You won't believe what we found in Paris, her former student began excitedly. They're using a completely new kind of digital watermark in their social media posts. But we've already adapted the recognition software too. A knock at her office door interrupted them. Wilson entered, holding a tablet displaying multiple surveillance feeds from across the city. Each one showed cameras being installed, security teams being trained, communities coming together. The Senate committee approved nationwide funding, he announced. Every major shopping center in the country will have a photography-based security program by next year. Sarah nodded, feeling the weight of their achievement. What had started as one desperate teacher trying to save one student had grown into something that would protect thousands. Her phone buzzed again, another Instagram notification. But now, instead of dread, she felt anticipation. Because every photo was a chance to save someone, every reflection an opportunity to shed light on darkness. She opened the app and began typing a new caption: keep watching. Keep learning. Keep fighting. The light always wins. The future wasn't perfect, there would always be those who tried to hide evil behind innocent images. But now, thanks to one late-night message and a teacher who refused to look away, there would always be someone watching back. Someone trained to see through the deception. Someone ready to transform a camera from a tool of documentation into a weapon of justice. Sarah Chen had changed how the world saw itself. And that, she realized as she looked at her wall of success stories, was the most powerful photograph she'd ever taken.